Hello and welcome everyone to It's Good to Talk. Today is the second in a series of 3 conversations that we really wanted to showcase the simple power, but profound nature that conversations can have in making a real difference in terms of engagement and performance at work. Essentially, the difference that just good human connection can have in our relationships. So we're really pleased to have this second conversation, which is all around how conversations can shift organisational cultures. So how can simple conversations create a chain reaction to shift entire cultures? We're always joined by a guest panel that have got an interest and expertise in landing some of this stuff in large organisations. So today we're joined by Mattias Kanold from Electrolux and Peter Coates from Legal & General, who'll be sharing their insight with us shortly. But I'd firstly like to hand over to Nick Cowley to kick off today's session, because I think you're going to talk, Nick, about some of the work that we've done at the Oxford Group and some of the results that we've seen in terms of this simple paradigm shift just through conversations. So over to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, and hello again, everybody. Yeah, so we've been interested in the power of conversations for a long time, and we crystallized a lot of our thinking several years ago in the book that we produced, 5 Conversations to Transform Trust, Engagement and Performance at Work. And the reason we became so interested and excited about that was we had a real opportunity to try out the power of developing conversations to see what difference it made to an organization, and in particular the culture of an organization. So we were working a number of years ago with AstraZeneca, and we were working particularly with their research and development function, huge function globally, of course, around 12,000 people. But it was struggling at the time, and AstraZeneca were quite clear about this. They were quite clear that the performance of the R&D function was struggling. It wasn't optimal. And they'd done a lot of research and insight into why that might be. And there were a number of factors for that. Some of that was structural, some of it was strategic, but actually quite a lot of it was cultural. And as they dived into, well, what were the cultural factors, they found that there was, put simply, a real lack of engagement, particularly between managers and the teams that work for them, and to be fair, between teams themselves. And there were lots of reasons for this, but there seemed to be a reluctance, perhaps a lack of confidence, and a lack of skill, actually, in managers having honest, straightforward conversations with people who work for them. And they were particularly concerned in 2 areas. The first was around performance management. There just wasn't effective performance management happening, so that setting of goals and objectives, tracking performance, making adjustments just wasn't happening. And the second was almost at the other end of the scale, that talent wasn't being spotted and wasn't being recognized, and it wasn't being developed, and it wasn't being rewarded. And as a result, they were losing talent from the function as well. So some real bottom line organizational challenges. We were a partner of AstraZeneca, and we were asked to come in and help with the behavioral shifts to really help encourage managers to engage more with their people. And as I talked about on the last podcast that we did, one of the dangers sometimes when you're trying to tackle engagement is to take a very top-down approach and try and process your way through it. In other words, let's do lots of surveys and feed them back and hope that things improve. They'd tried that for a number of years and that wasn't working. So they wanted to go to the other end of the scale and say, actually, let's really focus on the power and the ability of a line manager to have a different sort of conversation with each of their people. So in order to do that, we really worked closely to engineer and identify for AstraZeneca which were the 5 particular conversations that they needed their managers to be having with their people. And the program that developed from this and that rolled out through 1,400 managers across the R&D function specifically zoomed in on what are they, why are they important, how do they land with people, how does it make them feel, and how does it make you feel when these things land well, and yet at the same time to make them very simple and very actionable, so that immediately you could go away not only knowing what to do and how to do it, but feeling inspired that you wanted to do it. And that was the thing we managed to pull off together in terms of working with AstraZeneca. So in terms of the cultural impact, Andy, because of the large scale of this program over several years, and because we could track key measures such as engagement scores and so on and so forth, we could visibly see, as could AstraZeneca, that the culture of the function was changing before our eyes in the simple way of this chain reaction that you mentioned about, which is the conversations now starting to happen, which meant there was a stronger relationship with the line manager and more trust between the line manager and the individual. And this really powerful trusting relationship with the line manager led to more engagement and commitment on the part of both parties, which led to the outcome and the performance, this chain reaction that we believe is so important. So we knew from that work there was something about really isolating and focusing on the power of conversation and making it very specific in terms of why, what it is, why it matters, and how do you do it. And another really quick example at another scale, Andy, we worked with another organization which was a not-for-profit, again, scientific charity type organization. They had a similar issue in terms of performance management, top down, not listening. And again, by going in and encouraging and picking up a point that Peter was mentioning earlier was around the power of peer and live and day-to-day conversations that people happen. And just some of the outcomes from that work, they could see that leaders at all levels were now more visible and empowered. They could identify opportunities and responsibilities for people, and that actually the nature of leadership had changed in that organization and was now much more democratic. All of that is part of how they shifted the culture into one which was much more spontaneous, much more organic, and worked more effectively. So a couple of examples, a really large one and a much smaller one, about how for us the power of conversations, can really change the dial on aspects of the culture.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to bring in our two guests now. So firstly, I was going to introduce Peter Coates from Legal & General. So tell us a little bit about you, Peter, and your interest in this area, if you don't mind.
Yeah, great. Happy to. So yeah, I'm a learning and development manager for Legal & General. I've got a small team of learning professionals. And my main area of focus is on our group protection business in Legal & General, part of the retail division. We're around 350 people in total, but there's 4 business areas. So how those business areas communicate with each other is quite an interesting one for me. And over the last sort of 12 months, 24 months, we've done quite a lot of work on that cultural, the cultural part of our organisation. And that's where I get the interest from this. We've rolled out a program, obviously based on the 5 conversations that we've called Leading with Emotional Intelligence, because I think the connection is very, very strong with what Nick was talking about in his introduction. And yeah, just how we, doing a lot of thinking on how we change the culture and we get more united. And we've actually got a strap phrase for that as together as one. So bringing those 4 business units together as one to achieve what we want to do as a business. So yeah, I'll pause there because there's lots of other things that we've done, but hopefully that's given you a flavour of why I'm interested in this topic.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Peter. And Mattias, over to you.
Yeah, so Electrolux, it's a fairly big organization, 50,000 employees or so, global spread, and I work with talent management within a part of that organization, the consumer experience organization. And to me, talent management is, well, it's about leadership and it's about team development and it's about, well, what we call employeeship or self-leadership. It's a fairly Scandinavian term, I know, but developing the employees, the democratization of leadership, maybe. And to me, of course, dialogue is, if not the most important, one of the most important tools for great leadership. Self-leadership and leadership, and then team development and all of that. So yeah, that's where I come from.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mattias. We've got a few key questions we want to get through today, and I'm sure we'll kind of deviate to other thoughts as well. But just to kick us off, I'd be really interested to hear from all of you, really. These conversations we're talking about, how as leaders do we make them happen, and what is the place of the leader, or what is not the place of the leader, to make these conversations happen that might have a bigger effect on the organisation? So I don't know who wants to kick us off.
I'm happy to kick off with that one, because I think we need to start at the beginning here with what a conversation actually is. So for me, it's an exchange between two people. News and ideas are exchanged, and I think sometimes as managers we miss the exchange bit. We see it as a way of communicating information and news to the people that work for us, but we miss the fact that actually this should be a conversation. It should be two-way. We're missing out on a huge opportunity to build relationships. I think that's got better over the last 2 years, but I think there's still an element of, I'm the manager, I'm the one with all the information, I'm just bringing it down from my boss, and I need to I need to tell all you guys about this information, and therefore I'm going to do 80% of the talking, and the people that work for me are going to do 20%. So that's where I come from.
Yeah, I love that. Great, Peter, thanks. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I agree, and in many cases, I think that leadership needs to be more and more, distributed, and people have a lot of different leaders, and in different setting and in different context and different projects and so on. But when it comes to creating the dialogue, I really think that the leader must go first. I really like this spiral of openness and trust. You've probably seen it at one time or another, that I can't force myself to trust anyone, and I can't demand you to trust me. What I can do is to be a bit more open than what I'm comfortable with, and if I'm a bit more open than I'm comfortable with, you will probably trust me a bit more, and you will be a bit more open, and then we have this good spiral going that allows us to talk about the different things, and thus work with the different and the more complicated issues. And I think that needs to start with the manager. So as a manager, I need to go first and be open with my hopes and aspirations and failures and mistakes and all that stuff, in order for anyone else to dare to take that step. So yeah.
Mattias, I completely agree with you, and I think reading Nick's book made me reflect on my experience as a people manager, and I've been doing it for a long time, and one of the things I realized was that I had almost like a personal persona and a work persona, and I didn't let too much of my personal stuff come out at work. There was just something about me that held that aspect back. And what I've started doing is and again, I think the pandemic's helped with this, but I've started being much more open. Look, we're looking into each other's houses now, aren't we? So by definition, we've been forced to a certain extent to be more open. But that for me was the key to building trust in a way that the depth of the trust from those conversations when I started open up, and that's not just about home life, that's about how I feel about work. It's my passion for my career, and my love of learning and development as well. So I think that all of that stuff, opening up, you're right, Mattias, it just is the key point to kick the conversation off.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you both, and it reminds me that we've just reached a really interesting point, I think, in organizations and how we work, really, which is people's expectations and requirements are changing, but also everything we were schooled in, Peter, if we go back long enough, about what it is to be a manager. And, I can remember vividly being told you must keep your distance from people,
Yes.
and you must kind of not show, that you're down with the team, and so on and so forth. Is really turned on its head, because if we really want to encourage people to bring all of themselves to work, and to give everything, their hope, their joy, their fears, their anxieties, in a way that we can work together to make the most of things, then we have to be someone that they can relate to and trust, and be open to. And behind all of this, there's power. That's what's sitting here. The reason that we used to hold on to the information is because knowledge is power. So let's actually say, no, we're going to share this power a lot more than we've ever done before. And of course, the other thread that we spent a lot of time on, and you will as well, on the whole neuroscience here, that the whole concept of fear, that if we're not careful, we're creating fear triggers for people all the time at work. And therefore, if we could do some simple human things to help people feel less fearful, but more positive and more wanting to make a difference, then that's what we're trying to do. So I think it's definitely of the time to be having much more of this openness and trust at work, Andy, really.
Yeah.
But I wonder if people need permission as well sometimes. So what we've done at Legal & General is create a very short, 2-hour workshop for all the new people coming into our organisation, which is based on some of the content of your book, Nick. But it actually says this is what workplace culture is. It's the environment we create for each other. This is what coaching is. This is what we expect from you. We want your ideas because they're really powerful. And we want to create this thing called psychological safety. So, we try and define that. It's a complex phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit scary, but with all the new people coming in, and we mix people from all different business units in this workshop. And we're seeing a really great response to it. I wondered how people would take it. Here's somebody telling me, but we're not telling them about what the workplace culture is. Actually, we're just opening up a conversation. It's a very facilitated 2 hours. It's great fun to deliver. And when you have people coming in that have worked in other organizations, just having a conversation with you about how it felt to work there. And then we've forgotten some people from Legal & General that have come back to Legal & General after trying a different organisation. These have been some really fascinating conversations. So I think people need permission as well to do the sorts of things that we're talking about.
It reminds me, Peter, of we once we leave school, we never again really visit with people. How do you learn? And what's the optimal way to learn, and how could you learn differently? They're kind of obvious conversations we should have about working together that we rarely seem to do.
Mattias, is that sparking any other thoughts for you at all?
Well, yeah, but I was thinking about the word permission there, and I'm thinking about a mandate in a way, a mandate to be open and to be to be open about the ways, again, the ways you need, what you need, what it is that you need in order to be able to learn and to have the conversations. And I think that's true, that you need the mandate in some cases. And in a huge organization like ours, there are so many, different cultures, of course, which plays into it. And then, cultures on an aggregated level never says anything about the individuals, of course, but there are differences I'm sure there is in one way or another a Scandinavian way of talking about things like this, and there's probably another way of doing it in Brazil and in China and so on. So and we need to cater for all. And we need to find the sort of a smallest common denominator when it comes to what it is, how we can talk to each other, and how open we can be, and what that and what not talking to each other, what that will mean to the organizational development. What's the lack of psychological safety? What that will mean to our our ability to innovate, for instance. Yeah.
Mm.
There's a cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard lots there and some really interesting points that are made. That the one that really sticks with me is that one about the leader going first, being brave, being vulnerable, and kind of role modeling that. And in a way that gives the permission for people to go there without it necessarily needing to be mandated or permission given. It's just a role modeling of leaders. And that leads me to a second kind of core question, which is the leader is one thing, but we're talking about culture shift here. So what other conditions from your experience do you think need to be present for these conversations to really shift culture? Are there other things that we need to be thinking about as organizations?
I think for me that the answer to that is well, one of the answers to that is why. It's kind of, where are we going as an organization? Is there something that we can all we can all follow? So knowing where we're going together as one is, so I keep coming back to that, and there's obviously lots of bits under there in terms of our strategy, but I think that's really important. But being able to explain that in a language which is really accessible, and I think that's where you probably will have a different set of communications with senior leadership, but you might have a different way of interpreting those with simpler language potentially for other people in your organization. And that's the role of for me, that's the role of the the tactical team manager almost, is to be able to convert that strategy into really accessible language.
Yeah, like the translator to really make that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Mattias, any thoughts from yourself?
No, I'm thinking about you. I mean, to me and to us, it's all about self-determination, right? I mean, we know that that's the basics for engagement and motivation. So it's all about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what we keep on talking about. And autonomy is what you mentioned already. So I need to find my ways of doing things, to find the connection between my values and the organizational values, starting with my own values, of course. And mastery about getting the mandate to learn, of course, and the purpose of relatedness, so to find my place in the team, and finding out how can I be me in this context. And we need to have all that in place in order to create engagement. And when it comes to dialogue and to conversation, I think that's also a lot about autonomy. So to what extent am I allowed to be me again, to express my values, and being helped in finding the connection between my values and organizational values, so that we don't force the organizational values on anyone the way we used to do in the 80s and 90s. I think I think that has to change to a certain extent. It has changed, but you can still see some bad examples, I think. I think that's super important, for just to allow people to be themselves when it comes to that kind of conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
And the conversation is the thing that I guess connects those two bits, doesn't it? It's about what I was saying in terms of why. So this is why this is important to me.
Yeah.
What's important to you? Whereas before we might have tried to force that. Now we can have a conversation, a two-way exchange around what's important to you at work. I think that's kind of really important.
Yeah, and finding the sweet spot between what's important to me and what are the business needs, because we need to find that sweet spot. Otherwise it won't work long term or sustainably.
I think, Andy, as well, for me, partly to Peter's point, I think there's got to be some courage and some trust and faith in this approach. If you want to use conversations as a way of helping shift the culture, this isn't a quick fix. It's definitely not a quick fix. This is a slow burn, which, if it's done well, will in time fundamentally change the way we do things around here. But it's going to take some time. And a couple of conditions that I think need to be in place. The first is that everybody needs to experience what these conversations feel like, to hold them and to receive them. So that means at all levels, including the most senior level, which is a challenge, there needs to be open, genuine, trusting conversations between peers as well, in order to feel what this feels like, and feel the anxiety, and at the same time the exhilaration of having a different sort of conversation. I mean, when we were, you probably remember, Andrew, when we were preparing the book and thinking about the approach and the model, we started to have conversations within the business with people we'd known for a long time, but we'd never had this sort of conversation before. To Peter's point about things that mattered to us, about who we were, about what counted for us. And at the same time, that was both curious because we'd never had those conversations, but also tremendously powerful. So I think it has to be, the paper has to be lit somewhere, and senior leaders have to experience this to some extent for themselves in order to really believe in it as a way of doing things. I mean, that would, for me, would be a fundamental condition, really. And as you know, the very first organization we did this with, when we tried the program, we took the global leadership team as a team through this 5 conversations program. And that was tremendously powerful for their culture. So there are lots of cultures, as Mattias is saying. It was a culture for the global leadership team. And, you know, what this program did was help them think about, well, what culture do we want as a global leadership team? So I think it's ripples within ripples as well, this kind of thing.
And it's not doing something, is it, Nick, that's got the label culture? I'm going to do something about culture now. This is the start point, this is the end point. I mean, we recently had our first ever conference, 350 people in a hotel. We were hoping it wasn't going to be a super spreader event, and it wasn't. But, you know, we're in the business of insurance. We're in the business of helping people at one of the worst possible times of their lives. And you know, to get 350 people in a room together watching a video from one of our members, the people that we protect, talking about what we did to support her with multiple rehabilitation to get her back to work, was fabulous, in the sense of creating the culture of, oh, I might be doing customer service actually as my day job, but I can see the part I play now in achieving that purpose as a business. And for me, I think there were 350 people that day having some fabulous conversations peer to peer about our culture and the value of working for our business. And that I think that's an example, Nick, of where actually you can do something, you know, like getting the whole of the leadership team together, getting the whole of the community together, doing something that doesn't have the word culture written on it, but actually has the impact of pushing the culture, probably more in one day than lots and lots of training and other things that you could do.
Agreed.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm sat here listening about these wonderful conversations, but we probably should table the thing we haven't talked about, which is, how do you have a difficult conversation? Because that's really important as well, isn't it? You know, how do you challenge unhelpful behaviour? And I know for us at the Oxford Group, we see that as a fundamental part of the programme, the 5 conversations approach. And it's the one where a lot of managers spend a lot of their anxiety and time, and leaders even, in going there with the bravery to have the difficult, challenging conversation without breaking this culture that you've created, that you tried so hard to nurture, and you don't want to go there and mess it up in any way. I'm just would be keen to hear thoughts on, you know, how do you have those adult to adult difficult conversations, because they're important in shifting the culture and making sure the organisation performs. Any thoughts?
Well, I've been working a lot with using the SCARF model for that kind of conversations. I think it's a really helpful tool in a way to try to steer the conversation in the right direction, because we all know what happens when we get when we have the difficult conversations, when we get some constructive feedback or whatever we want to call it, we get stupid and we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And as a leader, as a manager, when you have that kind of conversation, you need to try to mitigate that in one way or another, to see what can I do to make this, well, a bit more impactful or less impactful, maybe, depending on what it is that you want to do, you know. And then I think SCARF model or models like that could really be useful and helpful, because it is difficult, you know. It isn't something that you could just do based on gut feeling if you haven't really practiced it before. So
yeah, definitely, I agree completely. I think having a structure to have the conversation is really important, and obviously there's a structure that you talk about in the 5 Conversations book, but for me it's also about thinking deeply about that prerequisite for the conversation, which is trust, you know, again, and have I built sufficient relationship with this person to be able to actually give them, you know, some feedback, and to say how I felt about their behavior, and all those good things that lead to a you know, a positive result. And I just give you a quick anecdote from one of the people that went through our training program. He was having a number of difficulties with having an honest conversation. The person wasn't receptive and what have you. And our office in Hove is really adjacent to a very beautiful and large park. So his approach was to, come on, let's go for a walk. And they went for a walk in the park, and they talked about where they were coming from, both of them. They had an exchange. It was a two-way exchange. And at the end of it, he said, this has been the best one-to-one I've ever had. Yeah. So it's about thinking, hang on, can I do something different here? Can I, what is it that makes this person tick? How am I going to connect with them as an individual? And I don't know what that might be, but if you know your people, you'll have an idea. And then my encouragement to people that I'm training is have a go. You're not getting anywhere up to now. So just have a go with a different approach.
You're right, because this isn't about getting it right, Peter, you know, as you say. One of the things we're very clear on in our work is this isn't about a skill. In a way, the more skillful you get at having conversations, in a way, the less authentic and honest and genuine they are. And I believe that people will sense your sincerity and your integrity, even if you're not quite sure what you want to say or you stumble a little bit. They'll actually feel that more. And I think trust is reciprocal. So the more you see me feeling a little anxious or a little uncomfortable or stumbling, you will respect that. And you will also say, actually, I want to work with this person. I want to talk and I want to build something. So my encouragement is, you're right. Just try it, and don't try and get too slick at it. You know, just do it with your intuition and with your integrity, and say, let's have a conversation.
Fantastic.
And I don't know what Mattias thinks, but like when I'm training people in terms of this conversation, and they say, you know, do a bit of preparation beforehand. I say, but only prepare for 5 to 10 minutes. Don't over prepare, because if you over prepare, again, to your point, Nick, you're going in this direction regardless of what they say, that it doesn't become a conversation.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on that, Mattias?
No, but I agree. You need to do the groundwork. You need to create the environment of openness and trust until you can do anything. Then I think it's good to have a tool also, and to be aware of what it is that you want to say, and to actually practice saying that a couple of times. Because I mean, when if you're delivering a difficult message, you know, it can be, you get less access to your brains as well, you know. So it is good to come prepared, I think, but you definitely need both. You can't do it solely based on technique, but I'm not sure you can do it solely based on, maybe you can, but I would advise not to do it solely based on your relationship either, you know.
No, absolutely. So we're kind of racing out of time here a bit. So I just wanted to bring things to a summary, really. It would be great to get just your 1 or 2 tips in terms of any organisations that are listening there today that you would offer in terms of really landing this conversational piece, this trust, this engagement that we're talking about for good quality conversations that really do feed into shifting the culture. What would be your 1 or 2 top tips? Should we go around the room? Anybody want to kick us off? Anything burning?
Well, to me, it is really about getting close to the limits of your comfort zone when it comes to openness. You know, be a bit more open than you think you can be. You know, with your own mistakes and shortcomings. It is difficult, but I think that's what's needed really, because you get so much back, especially in any relationships, but especially as a manager. If you take the first step there and show that you're imperfect and that you need help and that you're insecure and all that stuff, that will open up so many doors. So that's, if I only had one tip to give, that would be a bit more open.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Mattias. Peter, Nick, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think just focus on creating an environment, and there are a lot of things that you can do, but create an environment where people feel able to express themselves. And I think there are so many things that you can do to achieve that. But that concept of psychological safety, it's one of the things that I really look for in our staff survey. We're going to have a specific question on there. Do you feel confident to speak up, without, fear of, I'm not quite sure of the question, but without fear of reprisal or something like that. It's not that, but that's really important, I think, for us to all think about. So we might feel able to speak up in all sorts of situations, but actually there's plenty of people in the organization that don't. And actually, what more can we do to encourage their great ideas and their real concerns? And that's back to that conversation again, isn't it? To build trust and relationships.
Yeah, I love that, Peter. Thank you. Nick, any closing thoughts?
Well, just to build on some of the other stuff, you picked out particularly the difficult conversation or the unhelpful behaviour one, Andy. But I think actually helping people realise that different sorts of conversations are needed at different times. So the reason that we came up with the 5 conversations is we think all 5 of those are needed at different times. So yes, challenging and helpful behavior is one, but just as important, and as you know, the one that people just don't do enough of, is showing genuine appreciation and spending time really helping people understand why they do what they do really well. And that's a great conversation to have from an appreciative inquiry point of view. And people just need not permission, but they just need help to realize that's a useful conversation, because otherwise we all just take it for granted, that we're all doing a good job and we know what we're doing. So I think being specific about the sorts of conversations that will be helpful for people from an organizational point of view is a good thing to do as well.
Fantastic. Well, listen, a huge thank you to you all for such a rich conversation. There was so much to take away from there. I've got a page full of notes here that I need to check back on. So appreciate your openness and vulnerability to share your thoughts and views there. So thank you to our panel today. Just as some closing thoughts, why not check out the other conversations in the Good to Talk series? They'll be available on the Oxford Group's YouTube channel. And there'll also be links to them from our website, our insights page on our website. So just a final thank you to the panel today, to Peter, to Mattias and to Nick for your contribution to It's Good to Talk. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.